Well, the CFL is back. Over 600 days have passed since the last Grey Cup, and it was great to have some football back. Joining me to talk more about this is Evan Kenny. Evan, thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you, Jace. Like you said, very exciting to be able to see the Canadian Football League actually back in action after, last offseason, or I guess the prolonged offseason, rather.
Yeah, it was definitely longer than a typical off-season, missing that 2020 season due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, there wasn't preseason games going into this season either, so what was the play like coming into this season?
Yeah, Jace, I think while obviously there was that long span, these are professional athletes. They have trained their entire lives to go out there and play quality football. And I think we did see that at least from one side of the ball, and I'm talking defense across the board between these four games. Some of the offense might have been a little off. Obviously, we saw quite a few different interceptions, 8 in total between the 4 different games there. But the defense was on point. It seemed like they had their timing going, Jace. 3 out of the 4 games started off with 3 and outs, with that one exception being the Saskatchewan Roughriders, who did in fact actually score on their first drive. But I do think that we did see some bright spots, all things considered, having so much time off. Like you said, 600 days there.
You know what? I think a lot of people going into this were expecting things to be a little sloppier. I remember when I watched that first game on Thursday, Hamilton against Winnipeg. They came out pretty hot, and I was happy with how things went. Going into some of those other games, though, Toronto playing against Calgary. I think a lot of people are expecting Calgary to do well in that game. Toronto won that game. Edmonton versus Ottawa. Ottawa won that game. So a lot of people kind of are talking about, hey, why did these teams going into it that were underdogs are now coming out as winners? What do you think happened there with those teams in Alberta that were expected to do so well?
Well, Jace, like we said, it was the defense that really stepped up. And for these teams in particular, the defense is what carried them. You brought up the Edmonton-Ottawa game. Not many people, if any, really had the Ottawa Redblacks coming out on top of that. But their defense was the reason that they won that. Edmonton would have won that game 12-10 if the Ottawa Redblacks defense hadn't scored a touchdown there, which we will get to in a minute here, Jace. But I also think just that off time there, we mentioned the offenses weren't exactly clicking quite right. Going back to that Edmonton game once again, they were getting tons of completions, lots of yards. They just couldn't quite capitalize. So I feel like, that timing, that time off kind of just threw them off a little bit there, Jace. And just talking about, underdog success, one team that, while they might not necessarily be an underdog in most games, they were in their first game, week 1 here of the CFL season. That's the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I know they're the reigning Grey Cup champions, but they had a record of 11-7 in 2019, while the Hamilton Tiger Cats had a record just 3 losses in 2019. So while they're not necessarily the same underdogs as, say, Toronto or Ottawa, teams that combined had 7 wins, they still were technically an underdog there.
Now, Evan, another big storyline going, I think, into that 2020 season that didn't happen and continued into this 2021 season was a lot of movement around the league. There was a lot of players going to different teams, especially in the quarterback position. Even head coaches, there was a lot of rookie head coaches starting off this season. So, Evan, we're going to be talking about what player do you think, new player to a team, really performed well in week 1?
Yeah, Jace, lots of new faces and lots of new places. Just going back to that Edmonton-Ottawa game there, I think there's one guy that really stands out to me. He started off his CFL career with the Ottawa Redblacks, and he had a couple unbelievable seasons. In 2015, tied first in the league, 4 interceptions, and that's Abdul Kane. Obviously added 2 more interceptions in that game, including a 102-yard pick 6, which Jace ended up being the dagger that killed the Edmonton Elks here, who were making their debut as the Elks there. But yeah, that pick 6 actually ended up winning the game for the Ottawa Redblacks. He also made that was in on one of those huge tackles on that last drive of the game that stopped the Edmonton Elks on the 1-yard line. So for me, guy returning back to his roots, I think I got to go with Kane in this one.
I'd agree. He did have a good game there. And for me, I'm going to go with Lucky Whitehead from the BC Lions. He comes to the Lions from the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. He had his rookie season there, did fairly well, but did suffer an injury halfway through the season. Comes to BC. Now, BC struggled out of the gate in that game. They had a rookie Canadian quarterback, so they were down a lot early. But Lucky Whitehead, he had 5 receptions for 136 yards, and he did catch a 71-yard reception there for the touchdown. So I think if he can stay healthy, and if the BC Lions can get Mike Riley healthy, maybe he can be one of the pieces that helps them have some success down the road into this season. And now finally, Evan, going ahead into Week 2, let's talk about some of the matchups that you're looking forward to and some of your picks going into Week 2 of the CFL season.
Yeah, Jace, for me, I'm looking for these Alberta teams to really bounce back moving forward here. I mean, looking, BC obviously struggled, especially in that first half against the Saskatchewan Roughriders. I'm thinking that the Calgary Stampeders in their game this upcoming Thursday will be able to do a similar type of tactic like we saw in Saskatchewan. So I have the Stampeders winning that one. And then let's just go through, I guess, in order day by day. Friday, I have the Winnipeg Blue Bombers being the Toronto Argonauts. While I think it's great Toronto, got off to the good start beating Calgary there, I don't know if that will quite happen 2 weeks in a row, especially against a Winnipeg team, which you could argue is better, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Montreal versus Edmonton. Montreal hasn't played a game yet. They're the only team in the CFL who haven't. So I just think, because the Elks have those reps under their belt already, that they'll be able to walk away with this one. And then Hamilton versus Saskatchewan. It's so difficult to win at Mosaic unless you are the Rough Riders. For that reason exactly, I'm going with the Rough Riders in this one, Jace.
All right, well, I'm pretty close with you there. I am going to go with Hamilton against Saskatchewan. I think the keys to Hamilton's game are going to be Cody Fajardo is going to get a lot of pressure from Hamilton. I think Hamilton's D is very good, and I think if they can pressure Fajardo, that's going to be a challenge. But like you said, when you play in Mosaic, it's very hard to win, but I am going to go with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. I think that they are going to be another good team in that East Division. Well, thank you so much, Evan, for joining me today, and I know you're excited. I'm excited to get some CFL football back, and I'm sure we'll be talking about them again in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Jace. Looking forward to this upcoming Thursday, Week 2. Here we go.